All right, so we were just finishing the lecture on, I was just kind of opening up the situation that Chile was facing, having a socialist that seemed to feel the administration that another communist regime was going to be taking place in the Western Hemisphere. But with Fidel, even though he was very popular and that the revolution had a very strong popular base to it at the time, it was a revolution. It wasn't an election, right? So Fidel came to power by the barrel of the gun. Okay, Mao wrote, "Political power comes from the barrel of the gun." That's how, what you do in a revolution. This was a more complicated scenario because for the U.S., here in the Western Hemisphere, someone that they interpreted as being maybe more radical or potentially radical, becoming friendly terms with Fidel, they thought, well, we can't accept even a democracy taking on Marxism and doing anything that would invite more Soviet influence, especially in our hemisphere. And that's kind of how it was pitched. Now, is that the case, or was there simply a threat to those business interests that we talked about? Or was it both? There's been a big debate about what the real interest was. At the time, it made sense for liberals and conservatives that the U.S. needed to contain communism, and so here's the problem now. So what's the solution? Henry Kissinger here is actually seen as a war criminal by many people in the world because of the U.S. involvement in this. Not everybody. And he's also seen as a hero, and he's very much celebrated politician and intellectual to this day as well. So he's a controversial character, known to have been popular with the ladies, maybe still so, kind of like Benjamin Franklin. I don't know. Anyhow. I think he said power is the world's greatest aphrodisiac. So, anyways, take it or leave it. So, he said, I don't see why we need to stand by and watch a country go communist because of the irresponsibility of its own people. That's a famous quote that he said as a national advisor to Nixon. So, he was really an architect of a coup to overthrow democracy that he thought was based out of irresponsibility. Okay? In 1970. And so on September 11th, yes, here's the irony, right? September 11th is our great day of tragedy. And the irony is, some conspiratorial theorists might not see it as an irony. I'm going to go with the irony. But September 11th, 1973, September, the CIA and Nixon administration orchestrated a coup with some members of the Chilean military. And the Chilean Air Force actually dropped bombs on their state White House equivalent. Tanks shelled the building and infantry broke in. Can you imagine if a foreign power supported and backed parts of the U.S. military, and our military went in and bombed part of the White House to overthrow our president and install a military dictatorship? Well, that's what the U.S. helped orchestrate. Some say Allende committed suicide while he was there. Others say he fought his last breath. More than 2,000 people died in this initial aspect of the conflict, but its legacy was more brutal. So again, we talk about the 9/11 legacy. And here's some little manuscripts from some dialogue between Nixon and Kissinger. Nothing new of any importance, or is there? Kissinger, nothing of very consequence. The Chilean thing is getting consolidated, and of course the newspapers are bleeding because a pro-communist government has been overthrown. Nixon, isn't that something? Isn't that something? Kissinger, we didn't do it. We helped them, created the conditions as great as possible. Nixon, that is right, and that is the way it is going to be played. This isn't considered a conspiracy theory, by the way. There is a conservative political science professor at MJC um, who has a different take on this, not the actual events. So again, some say, hey, look, real politics. Sometimes, to keep a balance of power between Soviet influence, we had to do what it would take, and that by doing that, we did win. The Soviet Union fell, and in the end of the day, these methods were justified, kind of like the ends justify the means. You may or may not agree with that. My point is that this history is not so much contended as much as the justification or not is what's really mainly debated about. If you see in that video of that one guy in the CIA, he doesn't deny the role, but he tries to downplay the harshness of it. And so you can buy into that or not. Well, what do we see here? What happens is that picture I just saw of Pinochet is how he said in Chile, but he's in the international community. For some reason, he's called Pinochet, so I'll just go with Pinochet. He ruled Chile for 17 years, very brutally, and I know plenty of Chileans to attest to that, although you have a small number, but not too small, to this day, who see him as a much maligned character that saved the country from communism and considers the people who disappeared by him to have been worthy of that. So Chile itself is kind of conflicted on the morality of the issue. He tortured and murdered thousands of Chileans. Some Chileans deny this. It's like denial of this happening. I have a friend, her father was imprisoned and tortured. Her father was a communist. And the uncle, her father's brother, was a pro-Pinochet or Pinochet supporter. And the uncles will not accept the fact that her father was tortured and claim that he was being delusional and that it's like a propaganda or some sort of lie. And I've noticed in the research that I've looked into, there seems to be this conflict. There's still certain elements within Chile that won't accept what Pinochet did, other than seeing him as a guy that saved the country from communism. Okay. And he had a lot of help from University of Chicago economics that, you'll see in part of that video, and you can look and examine that as well. And again, it goes back to I put down here, some liked Che and some like Pinochet. So we have a cartoon of Margaret Thatcher. How long can our opponents go, General? Thatcher. I used to find 6 feet was enough. Margaret Thatcher loved Pinochet. So if you criticize some naive college students for liking communists like Che, there's plenty of conservative, well-dressed people who defended Pinochet. So Che or Pinochet, as I said, I guess the world... that's how we operate sometimes, huh? And that's all I'll have for now. I skirted over the Cuban Revolution a little bit more than I wanted to due to time constraints, but that's one that's very important to look into as well.